The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
You're in violation of secure communication procedures, Commodore.
So we just went ahead and fixed the glitch.
There is no America. There is no democracy.
Our fifth objective, a new world order.
There are no nations. There are no languages. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West.
Right-wing conspiracy.
What do you call it when the assassins accuse the assassin?
A new world order.
Thank you for plugging in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
Well, just a second there, Professor. We fixed the glitch.
I'm your host, Professor Thomas Henry Horan.
He reads everything.
Good morning, you beautiful, bountiful, bodacious boosters. Before I get started, I want to get started on Europe. The thing is, by the time I get a stream going, I've had a fire in my boiler, and then by the time I get it going, I forgot what I was mad about. Let's review recent history. Europe. There is no Europe. There never has been. Let me explain. For example, everybody blames the Treaty of Versailles for World War II. Nothing could be further from the truth. Blame Europe. Europe is responsible for World War II. Period. And when I say Europe, I mean England, because England always pretends they're not part of Europe. Let me give you an example. Czechoslovakia makes no sense. Those borders were drawn by England at the Versailles Peace Conference. Remember, England was the most powerful, the largest and most powerful and wealthiest empire the world had ever seen. World War I left them even more powerful, although they were half broke. They redrew the map of the world. Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, all of those borders were drawn by England after World War I. All of them. Poland, Yugoslavia, Hungary, Austria, those borders were drawn by England. Don't ever forget that. Point 2. Let's take a look at America's position in 1938. Everybody knew. If you read the diplomatic journals, the foreign policy journals, the serious magazines and newspapers, everybody knew. They were already calling it the Second World War. Everybody knew it would be between the United States and the Empire of Britain. Where else was the United States going to grow into? The United States was going to use Japan as a lever to pry colonies away from England and France and Belgium and Holland. Everybody knew this. So, what does England do? They scream and they cry and they pound their little feet to get Czechoslovakia on the map. As predicted, as planned by England, all of these countries, all of these boundaries, they're like three-way factions, and everybody knows that's so that these countries will fall apart and England can come waltzing right back in and take over again. That was the plan for America. So they draw these boundaries, which fall apart instantly. So what does England do? They're complaining about Nazi Germany, and they turn right around and they hand Czechoslovakia to Nazi Germany. Well, that'll teach America a fucking lesson, won't it? You're already postured to be our opponent in the Second World War. Now you're just handing shit to Hitler. There's all this talk about the special relationship. It's special, all right. It's real special. Americans felt like Britain had tricked America into entering World War I, which is completely true. Doing Britain's fighting for them, which is, by that time, it had to be true. They were out of men. Remember what they had done to France, their ally, World War I. The first thing England does is turn around and go home. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget World War II. We're going to get to France in just a second. So they hand Czechoslovakia over to Germany, and what declassified documents have proven beyond the shadow of a doubt was that Chamberlain had an agreement with Hitler. Germany could have Czechoslovakia, and particularly Skoda. England could keep their multi-billion-pound investments in Western Poland, including that Fabrique in Lutz, belonging to a Mr. Frykowski. You talk about... You've seen Catch-22, right? The old man says, when the fascists were in Italy, I was fanatically pro-fascist. Now that Mussolini is gone, I'm fanatically anti-fascist. When the Germans were in Italy, I was fanatically pro-German. Now that the Americans are in Italy, I am fanatically pro-American. This... So first, they go to the mat to create Czechoslovakia and then just shit it out on Hitler's head. Remember, the president of Czechoslovakia asked for German peacekeeping troops because they spoke the language, and enough people in Western Czechoslovakia. They had already broken out into civil war. Europe had already broken out into civil wars. They don't tell you this. Hitler didn't do shit. Hitler got credit for Europe being Europe. Well, that's not all. So this is November of 1938. I will gloss over what happens in the next 6 months. Spring, summer of 1939. Russia, oh, we've got to stop Hitler. We got to stop Hitler. Oh, hey, look, we got a treaty with Hitler. Obviously, this is America's fault. Obviously, this is all America's fault, obviously. Then, England and France both say, oh, well, if you touch Poland, that's war. And Czechoslovakia is going, well, you people too. And they did. We had a terrible time. We could have pried them away from the Soviet Union after World War II, but the English and the French had just pissed them off so much. So much. And then, when Germany invades Poland, England expects the United States to jump up and declare war on Germany in England's defense. And guess what England and France actually do about it? They do less than jack shit. If they had attacked Germany in the fall of 1939, there was nothing. One of the German generals said there was an SS police battalion and a training battalion, and that every soldier and tank and everything was bogged down in Poland. They could have just walked all the way to Berlin. The war would have been over before it started. But guess what they did? After they declared war to protect Poland, they did less than nothing. And then at the end of the war, they did less than nothing to help Poland. But this is all America's fault. So France, the closest thing to an ally America's ever had in so-called Europe, after fighting with the Germans for about 5 minutes, they don't just surrender, they switch fucking sides. And England wakes up one morning and there's this big French fleet parked next to theirs that's now flying Nazi flags, so they sink it. So this is all America's fault. This whole entire time, England has gone from being our likely opponent in the Second World War to begging for help when they've done nothing but surrender and give up and lose and give up and surrender and appease and hand over. They fucked up in Norway. They fucked up in Finland. They fuck up in North Africa. They fuck up everywhere. They fuck up in Crete. They lose the North African campaign until the Americans come along because they divided their forces and tried to hold on to both Crete and Egypt at the same fucking time. Which does nothing but invite a German invasion of Greece and Crete. They fuck that up. They fuck up North Africa. They fuck up Singapore. They fuck up all over the world. They lose everything in a few months. After giving away giving away the keys, then they just give away the cake. They just fuck it all up. Winston Churchill's best friend from prep school sold the Japanese high command detailed maps of the Malay Peninsula. What was crucial about it, it had details of every bridge, the width and weight limit and so forth of the bridge. So they knew which roads to send the tanks down, which roads to send the bicycles down, which roads to send the infantry down. That's how they were. And England, who had built this massive seaside fortification in Singapore, they just watched the Japanese walk into the back fucking door. They left it wide open. And that was Winston Churchill's best friend. The FBI and the OSS know all about this. They know everything that's going on. Their king, for 5 minutes, is now a Nazi, making deals with the Nazis. He's laundering millions of pounds sterling into gold on behalf of the fucking Nazis. And England wants America to just stick their neck. They want America to send troops. Right before they surrender, they want a huge American army to land in England so it can fucking surrender too, like the French had to do when the England... You saw... Stop sticking up for England. Stop kissing England's ass. I love Monty Python. I love Yes Minister. I love Shakespeare. Europe, Schmeurope. Look what's happening now. What has Europe done about Russia retaking their land from Ukraine? Guess who drew those fucking borders? Guess what Europe has done about it? Sit around and expect America to fix it. Well, everybody wanted America to fix Iran, so America has fixed Iran. I hope they're happy. What are they doing to keep the Straits of Hormuz open? Less than nothing. As usual. As usual. What has Europe ever done to help itself, besides Napoleon? They have done exactly what they've done for 3,000 years. They have a separate fiscal policy and monetary policy. The euro is nothing, because it's not backed by a fiscal policy. By the way, who was the first country to ditch the European Union? This, of course, is America's fault. What does this have to do with the money? Well, there was the billions of pounds that British firms had invested in Western Poland. It had been Germany. Until England redrew that boundary. See? What does that have to do with Frykowski? Well, first he's a British puppet. Then when the Nazis invade, he just goes to work for the Nazis. Those polka dot camouflage uniforms the Waffen SS wore, the cloth came out of Frykowski's factory. The Russians, who were notorious for shooting anybody who wasn't shot by the Nazis on the very perfectly reasonable suspicion they had collaborated with the Nazis, that's the only reason they were still alive. And by the way, every single Holocaust survivor is shunned in the Jewish community, because if you survived, you must have done something to survive. So quit trotting out Holocaust survivors and pretending to feel sorry for them, because when that day is over, they shove them back in the fucking closet. You ever been to a synagogue? I've watched Holocaust survivors shunned by a big liberal synagogue. Shunned. But they trot them out every year to get sympathy for Israel. Guess who was created by England? Stop. And am I feeling sorry for Europe? You go right ahead and feel sorry for Europe. What does this have to do with the money? They did it again. We're going to talk about this. The Romans, what they did was they had a separate... Constantine tried to fix this by a gold standard. They would have a separate fiscal policy from monetary policy, and this would trigger runaway inflation. We have a unified fiscal and monetary policy, and we have runaway inflation. What was my point? It's all about the money. The Ayatollah stashed anywhere from $100 to $100 billion all over Europe. The Ayatollah, the Khamenei family, see, that's the thing about the son. Is he alive? There have been no photographs of any kind, right? And if they show photographs, he's going to have his face covered in bandages, right? Remember when that Tesla robot used to try to impersonate Joe Biden? And it kept walking into walls and shit. Kept forgetting what it was talking about. Remember that? That's nothing. How many of us here, a lot of you are too young to remember Konstantin Chernenko. Some of us may be too old to remember Konstantin Chernenko. Yuri Andropov, we will talk about him extensively when the time comes, becomes he's the chairman of the People's Commissariat for State Security, the KGB. He becomes, here's an interesting coincidence. George Bush Sr. was supposed to be president. The former head of the CIA was supposed to be president beginning January of 1981. Ronald Reagan stole the nomination from him. Bush was not happy. Republicans hated Reagan for a long time. They still do. He was the Trump of 1980. Stole the nomination from Bush. That's funny because Yuri Andropov became General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party in 1982. They were both supposed to be leaders at the time. A few years later, the wall comes down. This is interesting because Gorbachev is a protege of Andropov. Now, in between those two, Andropov was half dead. He had no liver function, or he had no kidney function. Like, this guy was half dead. He didn't last long. He was replaced, but he was a reformer. Believe it or not, Andropov was a reformer. He was replaced by the last of the hardliners. They dug up a corpse named Konstantin Chernenko. Somebody called it, one of the reporters, one of the international press pool called it Weekend at Chernenko's. They would parade this corpse around. And I mean, forget Joe Biden. This guy would be appearing in public and he would freeze and his eyes would glaze over for a minute and they would give him a shot or something and revive him. He was dying on his feet for about 6 months and then he died. They admitted he was dead. And I'm watching Biden going, nothing ever changes. It's all about the money. Oh yeah, Iran. Where's the money? Have you noticed, nobody talks about where they get their uranium from? I'll try Googling it just for shits and giggles. Just for shits and googles. I'll try Googling it. Where does Iran buy their uranium? For their nuclear program that is, Europe says is completely peaceful. Imports from Russia. No, they're not imported from Russia. Imported from a Russian uranium company called Eurasia, which is actually, their mines are located in Kazakhstan. And the reason I know this is because the Clintons own about a 40% stake in Eurasia. That's Asia. Where do they buy all that equipment to purify U-235? Where did they buy all that from? Now that it's all been blown up, I guess I'll have to buy some more, won't they? Especially if we take the uranium away. They'll have to buy some more, won't they? Have you noticed Hillary Clinton hasn't said jack shit about this? Hillary Clinton hasn't said jack shit. Because that just means Iran will have to buy more uranium. New pipelines have started construction across Saudi Arabia into the Red Sea with the Suez Canal. It's so much shorter to go through the Suez Canal to get to Europe. It's all about the money. It's about the $100 billion. It's about the oil money. It's about Israel's going to have to buy more weapons. Well, they make a lot of weapons. Everybody's going to have to, of course, the U.S. military will have to buy more weapons. That would be some nice stimulus spending. It's all about the money. I had another point I was going to make, but see what happens by the time I get going. The money. Did I forget to tell you something yesterday about the money? Oh, I don't. So what I'm going to do is this show, the problem with streaming video is it's expensive. It's either YouTube or nothing. However, I can build my own website. It costs about 50 cents a month to operate, where I can display PowerPoints that have embedded video clips where necessary. I can have audio narration. Audio files are tiny, and slide by slide. And then you can go through these slide by slide. I just got to take slides and put them together better. So I think I'm going to start with this project, and then I can always export it as a book. So I'm going to, instead of diving into the big project, the 25,000 slides and growing. Oh, that's what I'm going to show you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to create somewhat slicker, with AI help, turn these into somewhat slicker PowerPoints that can then be output as books. I can output it as a PDF or something. I've been experimenting with that. That goes pretty well. And then I can just put it on the website, and I can just charge people like a lifetime subscription or something. Like you guys will get like $50 lifetime subscription instead of a monthly subscription. And maybe it'll do it like by, and it can have links to YouTube videos and shit. But then it can be output as a book. I'm going to try that with this whole thing about the history of money and the syndicate. They found something the other day. I'll give you a preview. Check my emails. I will explain to Walter if he has me on the show. If not, I'll explain to you guys. I've heard I'm gonna go back on the show. I'll explain to Walter how I know all about how Google spies on you and how legal it is. How they always have. How I've always known. I will explain how I've always known. I will explain a few things. I was in the right place at the right time, and then I got the fuck out. For reasons I will explain. For reasons I think are probably becoming obvious. I got out very early. I wasn't in the military, didn't work for the government, and I got out of the whole deal pretty quickly. But they showed me a lot. Where am I? Before I move on to that for a minute. Here it is. The so-called Vikings. One thing I've been wrong about has been my assumption the Vikings were leftover Phoenicians who had gone underground. It turns out the Vikings, the Normans, were actually Romans who came up the back door. They came up the Volga and the Dnieper and the Danube and came up that way and then reconquered Europe from the north. This right here. This was unexpected. I unexpected it. This is not a coin. This is a pendant from the mid-800s AD. We think this shows John the Baptist. You know, John the Baptist was beheaded over the money. You know that, right? Because John the Baptist was talking about the illegitimate, the money. We'll talk about that. This proves that they were Romans. In my opinion, this proves that they were Romans. Because they're actually, no, what this proves is, these are Shia Christians, I think. I think these are Shia Christians. This is a pendant owned by a Shia Christian. And what I mean by that is, before Islam didn't come out of nowhere. Islam was an economic and tax reform. And this happened after the plague of Justinian wiped out half the civil service. And the only replacements they had were Shia Christians, who were Christians with their fingers crossed. They were basically crypto Jews, but a particular kind of Jew. I think they were baptizerists. Not Baptists like modern Baptists, but we know some Christian communities moved into baptizing communities. But there's not a direct link there. I think this coin proves it. I think this coin proves that the Normans were displaced by Christians. These were Shia Jews, Shia Nestorian Christians with their fingers crossed, and they are displaced by Constantine's he moves in this army of Christian bureaucrats. But the big banking families, he put the public treasury divided it up among several private banks. And I think that's exactly what this is. I think the people who got displaced went upstream across Europe and came back down from the north. And I think this proves it right here. This is not Jesus. This is John the Baptist. And this would prove that these were the displaced Manichaeans or whatever who got pushed out when the Christians moved into Byzantium under the Constantines. I will show you that Norman feudalism is Roman law, especially from the east. I was wrong. There was probably a lot of Phoenician infrastructure there that percolated along, but this proves, I think it proves, and this is what I'm going to do. So in the meantime, what the hell is this? Oh yeah, this is from Kupros. Remember I talked about Kupros? I'll show you more about this. This is a cross wearing a cross. And this has everything to do with the copper trade. And this is a female figure. It's a cross wearing a cross. And this looks an awful lot like this is the figures at Göbekli Tepe, but with the heads cut off. Oh, remember the Templars supposedly worshipped a severed head? They called Baphomet, which might have been a misspelling of Muhammad, because Muhammad's grandson Hussein was beheaded, and the medieval people who didn't have direct contact with Islam might easily get the two confused. But I'm also one, because I'm telling you, I may be wrong, I've been telling you the Vikings were part of the syndicate from before, and they kind of rise up again. They get rejuvenated or whatever, and come down from the north. Well, what if the Templars worshipped the head of John the Baptist? Didn't somebody also say that? Who was the severed head? They might not have known, and we might not know. Maybe they know more than we do now. What severed head did the Templars worship? Remember, this is all stuff that came out under torture anyway. A mummified human head, a silver skull, or a head with three faces. See, there are three entrances to the temple: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. It's all the same syndicate. And the difference between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism is a difference. It's an internal struggle over the company bylaws. Some theories suggest the head was linked to the Joanites. Did the temples worship? I think an English major would write better. Did the temples worship the severed head of John the Baptist? Who came up with that theory? When you realize it's all about the money and not about religion, well, religion and money were the same thing. When you realize it's all about the money, they were accused of worshiping See, I think a lot of it was they were in league with... See, the thing about the Ottomans were all about the money. See, by some traditions, there's nothing official. They worshiped the head of John the Baptist. And why would Vikings in the 9th century be worshiping John the Baptist instead? Or why would they... See, it's not mainstream. I think they're this severed branch. During the Crusades, the Mandaeans were popular skilled goldsmiths. And these were people who believed that gold was the distilled blood of God, or the God, or Christ. And this was in the border area between Iran and Iraq. See, they're saying that the Knights Templar were more Mandaean than they were Christian, which is very believable. See, this goes back to what I would call Shia Christians, because all Islam does is deny the cross, in the sense that that Constantine had used Paul's argument that all tax debts owed to the temple go to the Christian church now, the institution of the church, because of the cross had redeemed that national sin tax debt to God that was literally paid in gold. What Islam does in the East is, all they really do is they just cancel the church's tax exemption. They only tax the church at 2.5%. It's not like Henry VIII. This is probably why Islam failed in the East. The Islamic Empire failed at first because they didn't go far enough. In the West, they come up with a joint venture with the Visigoths. And the plague of Justinian, I think, moves these people who had converted to Christianity with their fingers crossed. I think it's very easy for them to slip into Islam because they still accept Jesus as a prophet, and there's all of that stuff, but there's no longer the Roman Byzantine, the church is no longer collecting all this tithe tax and hanging on to it. They cancel that. And in order to do that legally, and then for it to make sense in the courts, they have to undo the crucifixion itself. And it's pretty obvious. This is mostly done by Shia scholars, and they were probably Shia Christians, and the first chance they got, they just kind of get rid of the cross. And coincidentally enough, this is the exact same time in Europe, in the 700s, all of a sudden, it stops being about Christ the King, and it's all about Christ on the cross. The crucifix suddenly becomes the motif of Christianity in Europe. That doesn't happen until the 8th century. Before then, it was Christ the King, to the extent that they had any motif whatsoever. Christos Rex, or Christus Rex, the Roman idea of Christ the King. Are you with me? So, I think that coin just proved me right. I think they were displaced Joanites, Manichaeans, Mandaeans, whatever you want to call them, who got pushed out by the new Christian party, and they were already doing a lot of business to the north, as we shall see. And I think they just kind of go north. I think when the Visigoths, when the Balti claimed that they were Troyans, I think that was propaganda. I think it's very believable because they show up in the 4th century and take over the Visigoths in the far west in Scandinavia. And they become their most important noble family. The Visigoths, remember, they elected their kings like the Emperor Palatinate, whatever the fucking Palatine, it's all has to do, you vote for the king during wartime. Like the Roman tradition of voting for a dictator or a consul or whatever. It was very similar. What the Visigoths did was they canceled sending taxes to Rome. Bishoprics became more localized and autonomous. And they just stopped the money siphon sucking all the money towards Rome, which was all going to the east. Rome bankrupted itself for 2,000 years buying silk from China. That's all the money went to, it went to India. India is sitting on mountains of Roman gold. Have you seen that? They're sitting on mountains of Roman gold. One of the reasons, that was why. It wasn't just plain and simple greed for the Spanish conquistadors to start looting gold from America. It was, Europe was gold starved. Had been. And this was all Rome's fault. So the Visigoths put a stop to this. Well, the future Muslims, the Arabs come in contact with this, and they're like, hey, this is a lot better than the system we're supposed to be reimposing on you right now. And they get together, and then what we call Islam actually I think starts in Western North Africa, and then it spreads back east. It's like, here's how we do it. And it worked a lot better in the West because they'd already been decentralized for a while. So the Umayyad Caliphate becomes, it was almost like modern America or Europe. I mean, I'm not going to dignify Europe anymore. That was one thing. Here's the thing. Okay, now let me show you your preview of upcoming nonsense. Hopefully be on Walters. Let me show you what I'm on about. Nobody got up to watch? That's fine. 8 or more aerospace and nuclear scientists are suddenly dead or missing this spring. And I'll tell you what, one of these guys, I don't have another slide ready. Let me show you. This one guy. This guy, William Neal McCaslin, worked for many years at the National Reconnaissance Office. Yes, he was at the National Reconnaissance Office when John Bonet was murdered. Very high up. Very high up. He's also the new Edward Lansdale. He's deeply connected to Office of Special Investigations and Air Force Security Police. I'm suggesting he's gay. I'm suggesting he's shacked up with his boyfriend, although I can't prove this. I'll go out on a limb and tell you he's shacked up with his boyfriend, and I think I know where. I don't know the street address, but I think I know where. Because I think I remember this asshole. My point is, he's like this with Peter Paul Levenda, Tom DeLonge, and John Podesta. He is one of those defense, half military, half civilian. He has been an active duty U.S. Air Force officer since I knew him as a captain. I'm pretty sure it's him. It's 50-50. If it wasn't him, there could only been one other guy who was in his mid-20s and a captain in the Air Force working with the National Reconnaissance Office. I don't see how, and he looks familiar because he looks a little bit like my brother because my brother was career Army. So in uniform looked like my brother. The difference was, I swear, the guy I dealt with was obviously gay because he hit on me. Not in a brutal kind of way. But maybe it's not him. I will say that right now. But it has to be 50-50. And the guy I talked to was, I think one of the reasons they didn't know what to do with me. And so at first I was like, I didn't want to go in the Navy. So they said Air Force. And because I didn't believe, see, when I was a kid, my dad bought me all the UFO and ancient alien books, and my mother was furious, and he said, he'll figure it out. And I was pretty much, I debunked that stuff. But that ancient alien shit goes all the way back to Emanuel Swedenborg and the roots of Mormonism and Reformed Christianity and all of that. This whole Orion cult, there's a reason why they named that space capsule Orion. It's a cult. It's based on modern science fiction authors going back to Emanuel Swedenborg, who invented the flying saucer. He invented the idea that angels were from other planets. He invented all of this. He coined the word neuron. He was the first scientist to study the brain and realized it was a neural structure and not a branching circulatory structure like the circulatory system. This guy believed in it. I know this guy believes in it, and the guy I talked to believed in it, and I scoffed at that stuff, and from that moment on, it was kind of assumed I was going to go Navy. See, I was only 17. 16, 17, I'm meeting these people. Actually, I just started at 12 because there was anticipation I was going to go in this accelerated program called Stargate, and that was a real thing. It was a subdivision of the GATE program. Stargate was a real thing. And I know a lot of the guys who joined that program, they believe in that shit. They didn't want them to be Christians. I was fairly Christian. And so they steered me towards the Navy. And I swear it was this guy. If it wasn't him, it was one exactly like him. And I'm picking on him because he's not missing. He's shacked up with his boyfriend. I was shocked that an Air Force officer was gay because in those days you could go to jail for being gay. If you were in the military and this guy, the clearance I had to have to meet this guy, there's more to that story. If it wasn't him, it was the other one because there couldn't have been more than two. The point is he's up to here with Lavenda, DeLong, and Podesta in this new UFO hoax bullshit. And this is my prediction right now. This guy's going to turn up and he's going to claim he was teleported. And he's going to claim he met aliens. They are going to claim they have met with aliens and now they are in charge of the earth. You watch. You watch. They're going to try to pull this horse shit because the KGB was always trying to pull this horse shit. Between occultism and UFOs, and that's Peter Paul Lavenda. That's Peter Paul Lavenda's whole career. Ask him how he dodged the draft. He'll have to tell you. And Google who those assholes were. And I don't use the word asshole lightly. I did not meet Peter Lavenda.
Just tap the search chip below.
Thanks, Google. At least Google's. How do I know Google's listening to our conversation right now? Because I had a chance to work on that. I know exactly how they did it. I'm going to tell him all about my friend Serge. We're not friends. I met him. Nice guy. He tried to help. He took a job I quit after half a day. That has everything to do with this shit. I didn't realize it at the time. But when I was a teenager, I had a ridiculously high security clearance. But that's not what you think. Let me go ahead and tell you. They don't give you a badge that you just walk around the rest of your life and you go up to a secure facility and you flash your badge and they let you in and you just see what you want. That's not a security clearance. A security clearance is, they give you that. A clearance is a specific thing. Let's say I went to Boeing and today. And I was looking into something and I had to go into one of their plants that's restricted. Maybe they make shit for Space Force or something. I'm not going to see any of that. I'm a plumber. I am a phone line guy. I'm going to go in the input-output room and I'm going to check some phone lines. I'm going to be accompanied by a company security guard the entire time. And my clearance might be sky high because of the facility or the part of the facility I'm going to, and it expires in an hour. I've been told very early on, son, this is not a get out of jail free card. This is a get into jail free card. This will get you into more trouble in 5 minutes than you could get into in a lifetime. You stick with your group, you stick with your mentor, you make sure you don't get outside of this. I'd be quizzed. If you get down into this hallway and you're not stopped by security personnel, what do? The first wrong answer is proceed. The second wrong answer is wait for them. The only right answer is I turn my ass around and I head right back to this office and I report what happened. And we go from there. If you need to go to the bathroom, you follow this yellow line. If you need to go to the bathroom, you follow the yellow line back to my office. I'll let you use my bathroom. So a lot of times I would have these clearances, and that's all clearances. And that's it. It expired an hour later. Okay. The FSO, the fucking security officer, the facility security officer gives you your clearance. Now, if you're a permanent full-time employee, I've worked in places where the full-time people had to leave their badges at the FSO, the facility security office, and pick up their IDs and go home. Because once you're in, you're in. Nobody asks you, nobody challenges you after that except security people. Nobody's allowed to ask you what the hell you're doing there. It's none of their business. But they didn't show me the reactor. They didn't show me any of this stuff. But what happens is they don't give you this to take with you like a driver's license. That's not how it works. You might work at a facility. You got a clearance and your badge, you take that home. But I worked in places where you didn't even take that home. So, and it's very specific. This person, this facility have building numbers, cleared to see this, expires at this time or date or whatever. That's a clearance. Now, as it turns out, what you think of as a security clearance back in Washington, the way it was explained to me, and they didn't even, somebody explained it later on. They said it's like a credit report. It's called a PSI. It's a personal security inventory. And it's like a credit report. So when I was this boy genius who was supposed to go to the U of I at 12 and get my bachelor's at 14 and go to MIT and get straight through my master's and PhD by 18 to 20, because math geniuses burn out young, like Sheldon Cooper, because Stanford was off the table. So that meant I had to have security clearance at 12. So they went ahead and went through that process, and they dug deep, which, if you've ever, there's an episode of All in the Family where the FBI does a background check on Archie and another guy at the plant. Well, it's just routine because they work at a plant that does contract work for the government, and they're going to get a top, it's not top secret, but it's got to have clearance. And so they're doing, and the FBI guy doing it is just clumsy and ham-fisted. So my PSI said at 17, for example, so what happens is the FSO, now I'm sure it's all computerized now. Back then it was like fax machines and shit. This all costs money. So if I'm going in there and I've been recommended by such and such a detective agency or such and such security agency, and I'm there to do a specific job, and I go in there and I've got a good, the FSO just hands me my thing. I didn't realize they had to update, they would send a copy to Washington to update my PSI. Your PSI was very much like a credit report. And I ended up doing background checks that went into people's PSIs. Although mine was all in pencil and it was supposed to be checked and everything. I did a lot of the legwork for people's PSIs without being told that's what I was doing. Nobody told me anything. A lot of people assumed I knew what the fuck I was doing. Everybody assumed I was ex-military. Everybody assumed if I had clearance and I'm that young, I must be ex-military. Once you're in, nobody asks you what the hell you're doing. But I never took advantage. I mean, I took the warning to heart. Look, son, this is a get into jail free card. You walk off that yellow line, you might be looking at 20 years. They weren't Nazis, but they just told, this is a temporary thing. It's not something you can, and it was. But I didn't realize really kind of sky high. My point is this. That's how I met this guy. Because I had the clearance that I could meet people from the National Reconnaissance Office, which also didn't. In a few months' time, I met a guy, NSA and NRO, the two agencies that did not exist when I was a teenager. And I didn't do a lot of work for them, but I was like being recruited. They gave me little things. Here, take a shot at designing this circuit or whatever. I visited labs. I had a mentor who had been both Los Alamos and NASA. I'm not exaggerating. He was the one. This is how I got to meet this guy, if it was this guy. If it wasn't this guy, it was the other guy. There's only two guys. I'm pretty sure it's him. And I'm telling you, he's gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's a security risk. And here he is, like this, with Peter Paul Avenda, who's never been married or had children. And he things he has said about Stargate. He's things he said about Berkowitz. Went to high school with Berkowitz in the same police auxiliary unit as Berkowitz. Hung around the same magical child bookstore that Berkowitz supposed to hung around in, but he never met Berkowitz. Right. This has everything to do with his cult, this Typhon, OTO, UFO horse shit that these guys believe in. A lot of those Nazi rocket scientists believe in. Did I ever tell you guys about Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker? And his cousin who... He said that his cousin, who he called uncle, was the one who taught him how to torture and kill people. And his cousin supposedly had been to Vietnam. I couldn't find any record of that. But his cousin's father, Richard's uncle, worked at White Sands when the Nazi rocket scientists were there rebuilding U-2s, if that means anything to you. Well, all of these missing military people and science people, they're all working on spy satellites and space lasers. Like John Bennett Ramsey, like Rex Horriman's father, like Sherry Joe Bates' father. A bunch of these have been murdered or missing. This guy is going to pretend he was kidnapped by aliens, and he and his boyfriend are going to come out of the woodwork. I'm telling you, there's a picture of him somewhere. There he is. I'm telling you, it's him. Maybe not. Maybe it wasn't him, but it was the other guy. See, he got his master's at MIT. This is why I remember him, because when I got there, my mother was really sick. My family were poor. My parents didn't like the idea. I wasn't crazy about the idea, so I didn't go when I was 12. I waited till I was 17. So I talked to this guy, and he had been there. He would have been there when I was there, because I was supposed to go there if everything went according to schedule. Let me think. 79 or 80, I was supposed to be at MIT working on my master's and PhD, which in math you go through really fast. He was there getting his master's at MIT. So I remember talking to him about what I missed. He said, well, they do a lot of stuff here. You know, you just would have continued. You're going from this guy's lab to that guy's lab. Kind of thing. You know, there's a recruiter from the CIA. There's recruiters from the Navy when we go nuclear. There's recruiters I talked to. We visited an NSA lab when the NSA was tiny and didn't amount to anything. And I met Elliot Sommer, their chief scientific officer, whatever, old man. Very cool guy. Took us to a very nice dinner. So the other thing is, if I had stayed there then and gone to MIT, then I would have had a real shot at being in Rodney Brooks's lab, because he got there in 84. I was supposed to be there in 84, 85, and they were talking about artificial intelligence. I got known as a hardware guy instead of a software guy. I was a software guy, and I got known as a hardware guy, and I'll explain that later. I'm telling you, it was this guy. I'm telling you, it was this guy. And the only reason I bring it up is because he's going to pretend he was kidnapped by or visited aliens. Because he's all about that shit. And somehow or another, it's all about the money. It's all about the money. But those Nazi rocket scientists were all into that shit. Because my mentor had worked with a lot of those guys. He wasn't into that shit, but he'd laugh about how they really believed in that shit. And that Stargate movie about how they really believed that stuff. And they were encouraged to believe it. And that's a big part of that cult that we're going to get into. Was that my point? I think that was my point. I'm going to tell Walter all about this as much as I can. A lot of this stuff's been declassified. The NSA, the NRO, they exist now. But no shit. Dumb luck, a little bit of talent. I happened to be at the place at the time that I got to rub elbows with NSA and NRO and then walk away. Well, I didn't. They kept me. I did contract work. But those people would always assume they don't read you. It's not like a credit report where the FSO gets a copy of your PSI. They would fill out a form saying I was going to be there. Let's say I was going to be there for 3 months and I was going to help them upgrade their IO and all this stuff. And this was a secure facility. So then the FSO would query, he would put down, it was always a he. It was all men in those days. It was a man's world in those days. They were all ex-military. And all the engineers and the scientists were very childish people. They were nerds with power. They were very childish dictators. They were. I couldn't stand the whole business. So anyway, he would then he would fill out, I want to give this person this clearance to do this work at this facility for this range of time. And it comes back either a thumbs up or thumbs down, I think. Because it's all confidential. It's not supposed to bias anybody. They're not supposed to know. This FSO is not supposed to know what I did at this facility because that's top secret. It's compartmentalized. Now, once you're in, everybody's got a big mouth. Hey, you want to see what we're working on? They're talking, right? They're scientists. They're not used to secrecy. They're used to everything being in the open. Once you're in, you're in. That didn't go on forever. But it was how I knew where Serge got all of his technology from instantly. I can tell you this. I'll save it for Walter. I promise Walter. Well, there's nobody watching. You bastards, where are you bastards? Somebody say hello. Was that thunder? I need to get going. I got stuff to do. Let's just say shit would come up on TV and I go, is that what the fuck was going on? I should probably delete this episode. There's no information in it. I don't know why anybody watch it. Nobody's watching it now. I think what's going on is they're all going to pretend they were kidnapped by aliens and they're going to pretend that they run the world now. Whether anybody believes them or not. And Peter Levine is going to be out there. And so's John Podesta. And so's Tom DeLonge. Okay? Forget all that and remember this. It's all about the money. I'm Professor Thomas Henry Horan, asking you to please stay plugged in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
He reads everything.
You better bet your bippies he reads everything. Thanks, everybody. See you real soon.